Hey everybody, welcome back. Excited about this episode. I think there's gonna be some pretty fun stuff that we end up talking about. I know there's some elements in this specific quote that I think about often and always, and that I talk to a lot of my mentees and other artists and peers about regularly. So I think it's gonna be a really fun one. Some of you are gonna really love it because you're gonna love the quoter themselves. I'm sure there's a lot of big fans of this quoter out there, especially if you're an avid reader or a science fiction fan as well. So, Nathan, take it away.
Thanks, Ty. Great to be with you. So we're going to talk about a quote by Aldous Huxley today. So, at the risk of butchering a biography, we're just gonna do a quick and dirty. You should know who he is, and if you don't, then I guess do some homework or don't. It's your life, whatever you want to do. But well-known novelist, poet, philosopher, English-born, and best known for Brave New World, which you were probably required to read in school, or I should say, got the opportunity to read in school. But the quote we're going to discuss today by Mr. Huxley goes like this: "The secret of genius is to carry the spirit of the child into old age, which means never losing your enthusiasm." One more time for the slow kids like me. The secret of genius is to carry the spirit of the child into old age, which means never losing your enthusiasm. I love a lot of things about this quote, and I'm excited to break it down with you. I thought it might make sense to begin with a working definition of genius, because it's a word that gets used a lot that I personally don't fully understand or know what it means. I'm fairly certain it gets used out of context quite a bit. Oh, we should get tacos tonight. Genius. Is it
Yeah.
though? So genius, this is, I think, the Oxford definition: exceptional intellectual or creative power or other natural ability. I actually like the second definition a little bit better: a person who is exceptionally intelligent or creative, either generally or in some particular respect. Like I said, I don't know much about genius, but I think I know a little bit about the spirit of the child. That's something that really interests me and fascinates me a lot. I think, what resonates with me about this quote and why I wanted to talk about it today was, really just thinking about the spirit of the child. And I think the first thing that comes to mind for me is that it's not about acquiring more knowledge, right? It's not about figuring things out or developing our intellect. Of course, those things are important as well. But when we talk about spirit of the child, what I think about anyway is it's less about acquiring more, and it's more about not losing what we had all along.
Yeah.
That childlike wonder, that childlike enthusiasm. Funny how almost everything that follows childlike has a positive connotation. So I think about that idea, and of course how it relates to art, the art making process. And I think the big question that I wanted to kind of pose around this idea is, how do we protect that enthusiasm? How do we get it back in the ways that most of us as adults have lost it at times? How life or the influences of others, the programming that we've acquired along the way has sort of beaten some of that out of us. How do we get it back? How do we preserve the childlike enthusiasm, the spirit of the child, that maybe we've had a chance to retain? Because I think it's important to understand and just acknowledge, like, there's a lot of threats. There's a lot of threats to our enthusiasm. There's a lot of threats to that spirit of the child, and we can maybe identify some of those if it makes sense. But those are my opening thoughts on the subject. How
Yeah.
about
I
you,
mean,
TNC?
yeah, let's do some separation here before we really dive deep, because it'd be really easy for us to really jump into keeping the spirit of the child in our actual life, that enjoyment of life, that raw enthusiasm for everything you do, for family, for your partner, your loved ones, or all those things, right? Those are important. But since we're an art podcast and we're really talking about making art and growing as an artist in studio time, let's separate that into our studio practice and into the art world, keeping that spirit of a child as we grow older as an artist, right? As we continue on in years as an artist, how do we keep that raw enthusiasm, right? And so when you look at the spirit of a child, absolute freedom is something that comes to mind for me. I grew up in the mountains, outside in the Sierra Nevada wilderness, outside of Lake Tahoe, where my brothers and I could run free until the hawks started leaving as the sun went down. We would be running through the red dirt and out down to the river, riding our bikes for miles upon miles in the American River, coming home. I mean, there were no rules, right? There's nothing hindering you from riding your bike as fast as you can, from jumping off rocks in the water. I mean, it's like there were no rules. Nothing was inhibiting what you were doing. So there's this absolute freedom in the spirit of a child, but you also felt safe. As you grow older, you start to feel this, that safety is an illusion. You start to worry or have pressures of, I could lose this could happen. As you get older, you start thinking more about when is the end coming. You know, all these experiences start to heap up over time that cause your enthusiasm and that spirit to shrink. Correlate that to the art world. I've studied this a lot. One of my favorite authors, Madeline, who wrote the Wrinkle in Time trilogy, which is one of my favorite trilogies that I read every year at least. You know, she talks a lot about how she says, I'm not a child author, I'm just an author. Whoever decided that only adults can read adult novels and that there's an actual definition for a children's novel? Why can't an adult read something that's written in different ways? And so she says the problem is there's a certain age when you're not allowed to read choose your own adventure books anymore, and you can't read fiction anymore, and you're not allowed to color anymore, and you're not allowed to play with clay at the dinner table anymore. Plato's gone, and now it's time to read history, and it's time to study biographies. And I'm not saying this happens to everyone. This didn't happen to me, but I know this is something that at a certain age people go, time to get serious. And so that enthusiasm is now washed away, that childlike, freedom. How do we keep that in the studio, which is the most important for us as artists, place to feel that freedom, to feel pressure free, no resistance from the outside world? I can open that door, and I use this term that the studio is my playground. It's my sanctuary or my church, but it's also my playground. When I open that door, it's like I'm a 4-year-old sprinting in at recess. The door's open, the class is let out, freedom, dirt, sawdust, wood chips, jungle gym, bars, slides, whatever, basketballs, soccer balls, everything's out there for you to go to work with, play with. When I open my door to the studio, it's not always like that, but I try. I try so hard to have that raw enthusiasm of a child when I open that door. Paints, tools, canvas, everything to play with. Try to play and create and master that technique in complete freedom and raw enthusiasm. That's, I don't know, that was a lot. I don't even know where I went or how I got there because I have the spirit of a child.
Yeah, and
So
me
nothing
neither. I was
makes
just along
sense.
for the ride. You were like the big kid in the neighborhood that's like, "Hey, come check out the river." I'm like, "I'm in. Let's go." Hey, mom, I'll
Oh
be home
man.
for supper. It's all good.
Oh, I love
Um,
it.
no, that was great. I think one of the things that well, you actually did take me back to my childhood as well because we had I was so fortunate we had there's just a ton of like county, I think actually city land behind my house. We just lived in a regular neighborhood, but it was behind our house. So that was my childhood as well, as making my own little lean-tos and going back there
Yep.
with whittling weapons mostly out of sticks
Yeah. Yep.
and later on going back and writing poetry by the river, taking pictures. Like that was my sanctuary for sure. So I wanted to bring it back. I think it'd be good for us to identify and maybe put a name to some of the threats to our enthusiasm. I think I'll start, and then I'm interested
Yeah.
in your input as well, because I know you've had a lot more conversations with other artists through your mentorship program. So I'll speak from the first person. For me, I think the biggest or one of the biggest threats to my enthusiasm is perfectionism, is believing the lie that I've got to have it all figured out and that I have to sort of look like a reasonable representation of an adult. you know
Yeah.
so that's a big one for me, and the idea that till everything is just so, that I'm not going to be okay and that the work is not going to be what I want it to be. It's not going to serve my ultimate vision. That's the first thing that came to mind for me. But
Mhm.
what are some other threats to our childlike spirit or to our enthusiasm?
Self, number one, right? The judge, the
Hmm.
ultimate judge is yourself. I think for me, Like I said a minute ago, I try to do my best to go in with fervor and just childlike playfulness, but with the seriousness, because I think what Aldous is saying is the secret of genius is to carry the spirit of the child into old age, right? He's not saying to be a child in your old age. He's like, be a consummate professional in your field and what you're doing, but carry that spirit of a child with you along the way. There has to be a seriousness to my practice, number one, an adultness, a wisdom filled growth in my practice. And that can really get in the way of that childhood spirit. I shared this with you off camera when we were talking about stuff earlier. You know, I came into the studio and I've been working on new things and experimenting and leaving some things that I really liked, but were just taking me more time than other stuff. So I kind of put them away for a minute and was playing with other stuff. I'm constantly beating myself up, which you don't do much as a child. We're not talking young adolescence, we're talking child. Because as you start to grow in adolescence, there are plenty of things that you can start to mentally affect you and beat yourself up. But child, raw enthusiasm, no worries in the world, nothing to hinder you, nothing's happened to you yet, right? Or around you yet. This is just pure freedom. So I really wrestle with this a lot because my work is very falls into the abstract expressionist, neo-expressionist, Tashime, other kind of forms of expressionism as a whole. I have friends who are critics. I've been on panels with big museum curators in the past, and that question has come up because the critic and the curator, they like to throw their knowledge out there, which they're supposed to, but they also are trying to confront the artist to help them grow. And sometimes some do it with great tact and others do it with really poor tact. And so I've had multiple say, you know, your work is it's in the abstract expressionist realm, but AbX is dead. How do you deal with that? And I'm on a panel and I go, oh shit, really? You're going to ask me that now in front of all these people? I have to come up with an answer. And usually I'm like, that's hard. I mean, that's what I love. That's the scene, that's the history. Those are the artists that I love, that I emulate, that I steal bits and pieces from to form it into me. And man, so yeah. And so there are times I go, man, that's really, how do I move past that? And I can really get in my head rather than that ultimate freedom, right? In childhood enthusiasm, where I can just keep going, keep going, keep going and work it out. It can really become this pressure of fear and self-judgment. You're just another abstract expressionism, but that went out the window in 1962. And no longer that era no longer exists. It's over. The neo expression comes on the scene. I fit in there, but that's dwindling down, and there's still some neo expressionists that are alive and growing. But did that period truly end in the 2010s? I don't know. Like, is there something new? Can you still fit? How do you outpace or outgrow or innovate or invent? It's so difficult to do, but I can get in my head and I can take that freedom away really easily by going, no, you're just that. And so then it forces my work to lack freedom and pressure comes in, and then I fail in pieces and I struggle through the hours and the work rather than being like a child on the playground with no worries in the world and just doing this and that and color and paint and trying and playing, experimenting, no pressure. Then 2 weeks pass and you go, I did one. Oh my gosh, I did one. That one works. That one's incredible. Let's put it out there. Does that make sense?
Some of it. I'm just teasing. No, it totally did. I mean, you know what you just shared makes me wonder: is there a balance to be found between the the exploration, the freedom of a child? Thinking about that moment when you said that's it. I got one. Who was speaking? Who determined? Was that child tie? Was that responsible, reasonable adult tie?
Yeah.
A different version of you than the one who created it was viewing it. I mean, that's one of the powerful
Yeah.
things, right? About giving work space to consider and really kind of wrap your head around. But I guess that's my question is, in with the example that you just shared, is there a balance to be found, or how do we find the balance of that childlike exploration and the more rationally minded adult that or the seriousness, the professionalism that is, like you said, required to determine, all right, is this something that I should share, put out there, and explore further?
Yeah, that's a tough one. I mean, we're always looking for the magic in our work. that's not the whole work. That's in it. We're always looking for the magic in it that we can build on for the next thing. And so I think there's a quote by Christopher Moore that he says, children see magic because they look for it. They see the magical things, the supernatural, the angels in the clouds, like, those things that when you're a child, like, because you're always looking for it. And I think as an artist, I really try to put that into my practice as well, is that I'm always looking and searching for the magical moments, those moments of nutrition within the piece, like I always say. But I'm always looking for it. But it's real easy when the pressure comes in to not be looking and to just be going through motions to make, which is important. We talk about that all the time. There are plenty of times when there's no magic and you're just working. And that's when it's really hard to keep that childhood enthusiasm. And I don't think what Aldous is saying is every single day, no matter what you do, be childlike, have that brawn through, because you can't. He knows that. Guy penned over 50 novels. Are you kidding me? I mean, it's like you look at a Stephen King, hundreds of novels. There are plenty of times he's just writing. No enthusiasm, not excited. Today sucks, but he's doing it. As Anne Lamott says, butt in chair. He's there and making. But I can guarantee there are plenty of times where Stephen King is just giddy to get to work, or Huxley is just giddy to get to work and work on stuff. I don't know, man. That's a hard one, because I try to be childlike, I try to play, but I also am very serious with my practice too. But I think a kid is very serious about playing, very serious about getting to the river first before his brothers, very serious about making sure that Darcy Tom Muir doesn't beat me in the 400. You know what I mean? Running on the track because she's got juice and she can run. That's just a shout out to my friend Darcy. So many correlations to bring in and out of being serious and very focused as an artist, but also finding the ways to be very childlike and enthusiastic and playful in what you do.
Well, there's enthusiasm in the moment, which is fleeting. It's fickle. It's like inspiration, like we talk about a lot. It's not dependable to show up on time or at all, for that matter.
Yeah.
But there's also enthusiasm, or maybe we could just, for the sake of this particular point, use the two interchangeably, inspiration in the broad sense. And so I don't know, I'm just thinking about like the importance of having a broad, vision or purpose behind the work as a whole, understanding that you're not going to be connected to that or have that sense or that fire in any given moment, dependably. But if there's that sort of foundational passion or enthusiasm that's driving what you do, that's enough. Now,
Yeah.
without that,
Yes.
I don't know. I'm not sure if I'm onto something or not, but or if it's making sense rather. But I think that it seems to me that when I hear people talk about not having their inspiration, or like I said, if we can just swap out enthusiasm for today's conversation, that maybe the real problem is not that they're not feeling it in the moment, because we're not going to all the time, but the real core issue is not having a driving enthusiasm, behind the work itself or the reason for making
Right.
it in the first place. Agree or disagree?
No, I agree, because even in the days that suck, which there are quite a few, like the struggle in the studio of, I didn't do anything today, even though I worked for 6 hours. Those days suck. They're not fun. I still walk out of the door with a smile and go, I got to do that today. I got to suck today. You know what I mean? Like, and that for me, there's a raw enthusiasm. When you fail as a kid, it doesn't matter. You don't care. If you do something, you know what I mean? That's like you didn't, I don't know, I'm trying to think of childhood things that maybe an adult would consider a failure. You lost in a race, or we can use the color outside the lines. Oh, mate, let's stay in the lines. Like, okay. There's not this thing beating down on you. There's a quote by Marianne Williamson. It says, children are happy because they don't have a file in their minds called all the things that could go wrong. That's a brilliant quote. Kids are happy because they don't have a file in their head that says, here's the file that's all the things that could go wrong. And when I came across that quote, I was like, yeah, that's me in the studio. All the things that could go wrong today, that went wrong yesterday, that went wrong the day before. I was looking at a piece yesterday, had a great day in the studio as far as just enjoying myself creating. The rain was pounding on the metal roof, like we had crazy thunderstorms, tornado warnings, things like that. And it was so loud that it was so peaceful and just beautiful. That sound of the rain just crashing on the metal roof. It just kind of led me to, oh, let's just try this. Let's try this. Then when I walked away, and I was in it, man, I was just in the zone. I walked away and I looked and I went, ugh, shoot, gonna have to paint over that. But I laughed about it, joked with myself, and I think that's a hard thing. It took me a long time to get to that point. And I've had a lot of artists that I've worked with that really, really struggle with that. They can't smile about it. They can't laugh it off because that file in their head of all the things that are going to go wrong, predetermined going to go wrong, is actively opening. And so I think it's taken me a lot of years to not even keep that file in an easy access in my head, because it is easy to get bent out of shape over what could go wrong when you really have no idea. You're just in your space creating, be a kid, play, have fun, take it seriously, but play and have fun and be enthusiastic in the moments, even when they're horrible.
Well, I think about something you said earlier. You phrase it as, I think, self judgment, but inner critic, whatever you want to call it. I mean, that's a myriad of influences and voices that
Yeah.
we've sort of acquired over the time. So that
Yep.
that file of things that could go wrong, and I can't speak for anybody else, but for me is certainly in the dark moments where I'm not just letting those files creep in, but I'm just like sitting down like a paralegal preparing for a big trial, just surrounded by all those boxes and boxes of files, and actually digging into them. Going to that deep dark place that is not serving the greater goal at all, but it is spending time with those things, and realizing that that voice shouldn't get a vote, at least not in the creative process. And to your point of coming back to something that felt good in the moment. I mean, I can tell, sometimes when I come back the next day and I'm like, all right, well, the caffeine and the playlist, both strong. Work,
Yeah.
not so much.
Right.
I was
Mm. Yep.
I was feeling good clearly when I whoever did this was having a good time, but that doesn't mean that it's
Yes.
gonna be good.
The muse was right. The end result was not affected.
That's,
Yeah.
that's exactly right. But I've got something you said really got me thinking. I wonder if maintaining the spirit of a child in adulthood requires something that children don't have, which is perspective. When you're a
Sure.
kid,
Yeah.
there's no your frame of reference. Your history is pretty short. I mean, I
Yep.
can't recall as a 7-year-old reminiscing about what it was like to be 5. Maybe I did, but I'm pretty sure it's just like, here I am. This is what I'm doing.
Right.
Which is a beautiful thing. But I think that, I don't know, as an adult, it almost you almost have to have a connection to the perspective of the bigger picture to be okay with, or to give ourselves permission to spend time in that childlike space, with the understanding that, and this is just a personal belief, that there is no wasted paint, there is no wasted time in the studio, like you were saying. Everything leads to the next thing in one way or another, and that comes from perspective. So I don't know if this is true for everybody, but I think it's true for me as I'm thinking about it. That perspective of, I'm going to spend as much time in this place as I can, not all my time, to your point, but that perspective definitely makes the freedom of that childlike spirit, I think, a lot more useful, if you want to put a if you want to put an adult term to it. But it's not just for the sake of being free and loose and having a good, like, there's utility to it, in
Right.
the progression of the work.
I think that perspective is a great way to put it, because when you're a child, there's an illusion of safety that is always around you, because you never truly feel like you're on your own for the most part. I know this isn't the same for everybody out there, because we've all had different experiences growing up as children. And there are plenty of children that grow up not feeling safe or protected. But for the most part, those of us that realize, hey, I can go home to mom or dad or grandpa or grandma or aunt or uncle, whoever raises you, whatever, there's some sort of safety or protection that we all feel as children. That could be a sibling, right? That could be a parental figure. It could be a teacher. It could be whatever. But we have this illusion of safety and protection. As you get older and you age, that all disappears because now you're completely dependent on self. So that safety is wrapped up in you. That protection is wrapped up in what you do. If I don't make enough money, I don't survive. I don't have a house. I can't pay bills, those things. So when you're a child, it's a lot easier for that freedom and that enthusiasm to exist because you're not reliant on yourself yet for certain things. And I think as an artist, one of the things I love that Stephen Pressfield talks about in the book, The War of Art, when he talks about resistance, is that the one place as a creator that you should have where you feel absolute freedom is in your space, in your studio when you're creating. You should walk into that room, as I say, at your studio, shut the door and leave the world behind you. Your perspective is now that room. You shut the door, you leave everything else behind you, and it can't affect you. You're safe there. That's your purest form of yourself. Truest form of yourself is in that moment when you're writing, you're painting, you're creating, you're sculpting, you're playing music, whatever you're doing. That's like the purest form of your true self is in that moment. Leave everything else behind. So I think there are ways we can change that perspective to bring that childlike enthusiasm into our creating and what we're doing. Does that answer your question?
It does. Yeah. So I think the natural follow-up question would be, how do we do that?
Yeah, it takes time. It takes effort, really thinking about it. There are plenty of ways that I kind of have told other artists, like if there's certain quotes you need to put up in your studio that help you remember and enter into those moments, do it. Maybe it's silence, maybe it's breathing. Maybe it's going into your studio. I know I have a friend that goes into his studio and he practices his breathing, just a sense of meditation before he starts working. It's a way for him to just let loose and get rid of things. And David Lynch, and meditation is a huge part of his practice in creating. And he said once he had that ability to meditate and focus for a period of time, it opened up a whole new world in creating for him because he was able to get rid of all those other things in life and then just truly focus on the creation aspect without everything else creeping in. So for me, it's music, it's reading. There are those soul care moments, as I like to call them, where you're truly like caring for your soul throughout the morning or the day or whatever it is. Like maybe, there are days I come in the studio, I just sit and read. I'll read Mary Oliver's poetry, I'll read a book, just kind of center myself, so to speak, and then go into the studio and create. Put music on I don't know, whether it's Philip Glass on piano to start the day or something grander or smaller that just helps me truly breathe deeply and focus. And then I go play. But it takes time. And not every day is like that. Plenty of days where there's no child at all,
Hmm.
being
Yeah.
honest. There are plenty of days where there's no child at all. But I do try for the other side more than the frustrating side. But it's hard. It's really hard to explain until you've figured things out to get there. Because I see it all the time. Not pushback from other artists, but I don't get it.
Mm-hmm.
I can't
Mm-hmm.
do that. I don't know how do you do it? And I can only suggest ideas, but we have to find what works for us to find those things.
Yeah, I think a big part of it is getting, like, for me it's journaling. Like if I had
Yeah.
to, I mean, I've got about five or six, core, habits that if I do whatever, 3 or 4 out of those five, it's going to be a pretty good day, or at least not an awful one.
Yeah.
Or if it's awful, I'll be more equipped to deal with it, whatever, whatever it might be. But I think that, when it comes to really getting a lot of those just nasty thought goblins out of your head, those just nasty vampires, the self-doubt, all of the inner critic, I'm not aware of a better way to dispel of them quickly than by journaling and just getting them out. I'm a big proponent of the morning pages, the Julia Cameron book and approach to just getting things out. And I think that's probably actually another thing that we could spend an entire episode or more, talking about. But that's a big part of it for me, is just getting those things out of the way. Because the more that, again, it's back to kind of my opening thought of, like, it's not so much about acquiring, more inputs, but it's remembering what we knew all along, and getting rid of, or at least setting aside as many of those sticking points as we can along the way. It's a step in the right direction anyway. But I mean, like you were saying before, it just comes down to paying attention, being aware of, like, okay, which when you get there, when you do feel it, okay, what conditions were present, how many of these are
Yeah.
controllable, what I mean? Like, it's not going to be 72 degrees and sunny, and your sweetheart kisses you, on your way out the door and says, go get him. Like, everything's not going to be perfect every single day, but of the
Yeah.
controllable variables, what are the things that can at least do to influence getting into and being in that state as much as possible, or at the very least, continuing to show up, even not if, but when,
Right.
we're not feeling it.
Well, and I think ritual is a huge part of that.
Yeah.
Finding a ritual for you. I know when I'm at my best in the studio and creating, my ritual is built in. I get up, I have coffee, my wife and I read, sit in our chairs, read our books, whatever we're doing that morning. And then when I get to the studio, I may do a little art research and some things, and then I'm in the studio working. But just that ritual, if I'm doing that every morning, it just gets built in and this flow just opens up for me. But I have a quote I want to read by Picasso because I just love this, thinking of all these things we're saying. He says, "It took me 4 years to paint like Raphael, but a lifetime to paint like a child." And you look at Picasso and Raphael, high Renaissance painter, very controlled, perfecting his colors, perspective is excellent. Like all these things within his work that is so time controlled, detailed, academic. And Picasso said it took a lifetime for him to paint like a child. Freedom, whatever I want to do, however I want to do it, enthusiastic, having fun while I'm doing it. Nothing's controlling me. I'm just creating and painting. I think that's a great representation of how we can also do that in our own heads,
Mm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
Control these things in us rather than feeling totally free to experiment, to play and do those things.
Yeah, I'm going to throw one more quote into the mix, and then we
Yes.
can probably wind down. But it's one of the most famous Winston Churchill quotes: "Success is going from failure to failure without loss of enthusiasm." Most people have
Yep.
probably heard that before, but understanding that there's going to be more losses than wins, and protecting that enthusiasm, childlike or otherwise, is pretty important. Having
Yep.
the broad, push, the broad purpose, the big picture, fire, that gets us through the moments when we're not feeling it, in
Yeah.
that particular moment, I think is really important. And again, back to that perspective idea of just understanding that, there's going to be, plenty of failures. But I think that when we accept that those failures are a necessary part of getting us to wherever it is that we're trying to go, it doesn't make them easy, doesn't make them, not hurt, or, more or comfortable or fun, but it does provide at least some context for, oh, okay, this is moving me in a direction that I'm intending to go, and accepting that, all right, I'm going to, maybe not today, maybe I shut it down
Yeah.
for today, but I'm going to wake up tomorrow and I'm going to find a way to show up and make more art.
Well, and if you're not failing, you're not trying. And in art, whew, like you got to have a whole lot of failure to find it. You know what I mean? Like it's one area in life where your failures are not exposed outside of your studio. In work and other things, like out there in the real world, outside the studio world, you fail, people take notice, right? And that damages us. But we know all the pull yourself up in your bootstraps, can't fall down without getting up. Like we know all those old sayings that go with failure. But in your studio, man, there's just something so heavy about failing. But man, if you're not failing, you are not pushing. You're not pushing. I mean, I encourage all my artists, like, experiment like crazy. And it's so hard when it doesn't look good or doesn't look strong, right? That there's just such a deep feeling of failure. And I'm always like, nobody knows. Nobody saw it but me or the group. or your peers that you may have shared it with on WhatsApp or by email. Nobody else knows. Nobody. But man, it feels like the world knows. I don't know why
Hmm.
that is, but you're with yourself in the studio and you do something you don't like and you feel like every single person on Instagram just saw what you did. Now, if you're sharing it, they absolutely did, but you don't have to. That's why I'm always saying don't share everything, keep stuff. But at the
Well,
end of the
technically, I
day,
mean, thanks to the way Instagram works now, they're probably actually not
they're
seeing
not
it.
going to see it
So
anyways. Yeah.
it's okay.
Yeah. But it's like, we feel like our failures are recognized and seen more than they are. And it
Yeah.
shouldn't be. So once you start to realize that as an artist, I feel like there's a lot of room for that growth to really start to take place in your work, because you realize no matter what you do, nobody sees it unless you show them, and that you're going to fail. I mean, who knows what all of Picasso's crappy stuff looked like before he got to Cubism? We're never going to know. Somebody knows, but we're never going to know. I think it's a good place to end.
I
And
agree.
really, the whole point is to this whole quote and this thing. And we didn't even get into Huxley's mescaline and LSD trials at all. But maybe that's what kept his childlike wonder on a constant flow.
I had that thought. I wasn't going to bring it up
Yeah.
as a enthusiastic but retired,
Yes.
psychonaut. I can definitely
Which,
say that that kind of thing definitely, sticks with you. So I think there's certainly something to be said
right.
for that. So,
Which I want to
um,
congratulate you on your 20-year milestone of
oh, thanks.
sobriety. So congratulations on that. That's immense, huge.
I appreciate it.
But yeah, just if anything, we just want to encourage you in those moments that suck, that are tough, that are frustrating. Like, find that childlike spirit inside, that enthusiasm of, yeah, but I just got to make that. It didn't work this time. But as a child, right, you just pull out the next sheet of paper and the next box of crayons and you just go to work again. So hope that you're encouraged from that, because that's what Nathan and I do on a regular basis. Create something that is just not strong, and we just either go over it or scrap it and pull out that next piece of paper and that next box of crayons or that next jar of Play-Doh, and we start playing again. So I hope that you do the same.
I love it. Join us next time. Thanks for being here if you made it this far. Over and out.
Yeah.